Hello and thank you for joining me. My name is Ken McKim of Don'tPunishPain.com, and tonight we're going to be talking about the slow death of compassion 1 year later. This video is a direct follow-up to my very first advocacy video that I did last year in March, entitled The Slow Death of Compassion for the Chronically Ill, which you can see right here on my YouTube channel. So, diving right in, the first question I have for you, the viewer, is this. What is the defining characteristic of a human being that gives us our humanity? Is it our intelligence? Our ability to reason and problem solve? Well, it certainly doesn't hurt, but I would argue that's not what makes us human beings. We know that animals can think and reason and problem solve, otherwise they wouldn't last very long in the wilderness. Is it our opposable thumbs? Possibly. They're useful, but I don't think they are what makes us human. No, I submit to you that the thing that gives us our very humanity, the essence of what it is to be a human being, is our compassion. Because compassion enables us to act upon what we feel when we empathize with another person. And that's very important. Because by that definition, a definition which I strongly believe in, by the way, I feel that we, in the so-called enlightened 21st century, are the least compassionate we have ever been, the least human we have ever been when it comes to chronic illness and the chronically ill. I wish I could tell you that things had improved in the years since my original video, but we all know that they haven't. Society still views the chronically ill as a burden at best, and pain pills are still regarded as the enemy by those who have a very strong moral objection to them. Point number one, the DEA went ahead with the reclassification of all medications containing hydrocodone from Schedule 3 to Schedule 2. And everyone who said that this was a good idea assured all of us that it would in no way affect people who needed these medications, that they would still be able to get them, and that they would barely notice any change at all. Of course, we all know how completely wrong they were. It's extremely hard for a lot of people to get in to see the doctor every month now, because under Schedule 2 regulations, you have to have a new prescription every 30 days, and many physicians will not prescribe to you without seeing you in their office. You know, there's an entire segment of the population, though, that's been affected by this that I'm fairly certain nobody in Washington even gave a thought to during this whole process, during the entire time they were trying to sell us on the idea of rescheduling these medications as a good thing, and that is our veterans. I don't know how many of you might remember, but in 2014 there was a story that broke about how some veterans were waiting months to be seen by doctors because the system was so backed up, it had been so mismanaged, that it was literally taking some people 5-6 months to get in to see a doctor. Veterans are not given any kind of special exemption when it comes to these new laws regarding hydrocodone-based medications. They still have to get a new prescription every 30 days just like the rest of us. So what do you think happens to those veterans that are waiting months to see a doctor? Well, I'll tell you, they're not getting their medications. That's what's happening. There's a story done, and I'll post the link to it down below in the description window, about a veteran, one veteran in particular, who had served in Baghdad and been injured in an IED explosion, leaving him with some brain trauma, broken bones, and a herniated disc or two in his back. And so, as you might imagine, he was on pain medications. And there came a time when he had to wait 5 months to see a doctor. He didn't leave his house for 5 months because he had no pain medication for 5 months. This is someone who went over, served his country, was significantly injured in the process of doing so, and he was left in unbelievable pain for months at a time because of these new regulations. And there are more and more veterans just like him. There are estimated to be more than 500,000 veterans currently on opioid-based painkillers. So for them, this is a very big deal indeed. But no one in Washington thought of that, did they? I would rather believe they didn't think of it rather than they thought of it and just decided it was okay to proceed with a reclassification anyway, because that's a little too dismal, a little too heartbreaking to contemplate, that they would willingly go ahead with this reclassification knowing the effect it was going to have on our veterans. So that's point number one. Point number two, a publication called thehill.com brought it to everyone's attention, those who bothered to read the article anyway, that if Congress does not act soon, by the year 2016 there would no longer be enough money in the SSDI fund to cover all the people who are currently enrolled for Social Security disability benefits. Now, at this point, most people are taking home an average of around $1,165 a month on SSDI, so any reduction in that at all, this is the money that they are using to stay alive, to pay their rent, to eat, to pay their bills, to keep the heat on. Any reduction of this amount is going to be a hardship. So what's the solution to that? Well, normally, Congress would just borrow from the payroll tax fund to shore up the disability fund. The Republican-controlled House prevented that from happening. 8.9 million Americans who depend on this money to live, they can't do anything. They're just waiting while the clock runs down and the politicians in Washington do nothing. Point number three, something even more disturbing has happened in the year since I made my first video, and that is the increase in the number of pharmacies and pharmacists who are denying legitimate pain pill prescriptions. Now, there's an argument to be made that Florida is the worst state in the union for this, and in fact they are very bad. But there are other states as well that have adopted similar legislation, ostensibly to protect the public from what they call pill mills. But all it's served to do is ensure that innocent people are left with no recourse when the pharmacies deny them their pain pills, even when their pain pill prescription is legitimate. On this issue, there is a small amount of good news. Even though no one's talking about it nationally, some of the local TV stations, news stations in Florida have picked up on this and are actually doing stories, most notably WESH-TV in Florida. It's WESH 2 News in Florida. There's a reporter there named Matt who's been doing some very good investigative work on this subject, with the most dramatic example that he's highlighted being a woman who's dying of cancer and was told that she couldn't have her pain pills. Her prescription's completely legitimate. How a pharmacist is able to not honor a legitimate pain pill prescription written by a doctor is beyond me. And as you would expect, of course, the DEA has completely passed the buck on any responsibility for this. They're just blaming the pharmacies themselves. The media have scared the public to death with these overblown, overhyped reports on the increase in the number of accidental overdose deaths when it comes to opioids. They achieve this by filing these sensational stories with headlines like, "Deaths from painkiller overdoses among women have increased more than 400%. Holy crap, 400%, right? That sounds like a huge number. I mean, 400%, you're probably picturing in your mind that they're stacking bodies like cordwood in the middle of the streets and that the stench and the decay is forcing people to move out of the cities. There are so many people dead from opioid overdoses, 400%. What they don't do when they're reporting these stories, when they're using these scary numbers, is reporting both sets of numbers. Because if they were to do that, it completely takes the wind out of the sails of their argument that this is an epidemic, because it's not. Look, I'm going to settle this right now, hopefully. There are only two numbers that you need to know when it comes to opioid overdoses in the United States of America. And both these numbers come from the CDC, so pay attention. Here we go. The number of prescriptions written for opioids like hydrocodone and oxycodone products in the year 2013 was around 207 million. The number of people that died accidentally while taking those pills was 16,235 people, which amounts to 0.78% of the 207 million prescriptions written, which is less than 1%. There's no huge epidemic. People aren't dying by the millions. They're not even dying by the hundreds of thousands. This is not an epidemic, and legislation is not going to fix it. One thing that would definitely help is education. Why do people overdose accidentally? It's because they don't have all the information they need, because they somehow don't know better that taking too much of these pills with whatever other pills they may be taking could kill them. Let's face it, people with chronic illnesses very rarely have just one chronic illness, and they're also very rarely taking just one kind of medication. And the latest studies seem to show that the average time that doctors spend with their patients is, if you're lucky, 15 minutes. I think that's high. I think it's even less than that, and I definitely believe that it's not nearly enough time to adequately explain to a patient how to take their medications appropriately, what the possible interactions could be, not only with their other medications, but with food products. Again, the example that I've used before with the fentanyl patch and grapefruit. You can't mix those two. It can kill you. Education, I firmly believe, will help to reduce the number of deaths. In the end, the reason that pharmacies get away with denying people their pain pill prescriptions, the reasons that politicians like Bondi get away with these draconian regulations, the reason that the DEA can do what they do is because society is okay with it. Think about it. We've seen what happens when society deems that something needs to be changed. I mean, look at smoking. It was everywhere when I was a kid in the 70s. Good luck being able to light up anywhere in 2015. It's been virtually eradicated from our social landscape. Segregation, women not having a vote, the repealing of prohibition, all these things, society, when they put their mind to it, when they said this has to change, then change happened. So if society was not okay with the chronically ill being relegated to second-class citizen status, with them being denied their pain pills even though they're dying of cancer, it wouldn't be happening. We're giant hypocrites in this country when it comes to pain. If a 13-year-old has a chronic illness, they are likely to get sympathy and no end of people wanting to help them. And that's as it should be. I get it. We have an unspoken social contract that children should not suffer. I'm completely on board with that. But we need to tell these same children that as they grow older, the sympathy and compassion they're used to is going to be replaced with suspicion, if not outright hostility. That it's okay at 13 to have a disease like fibromyalgia, but if you're in your 20s or 30s, then clearly you're just faking it to get out of work. We don't like reminders of our own mortality, and that's what chronic illness is. We are all just one heartbeat away from having our health taken away from us. And we don't like to think about that. So we just pretend it doesn't exist for anyone. We demonize weakness. We malign illness. We ascribe a moral failing to people who are routinely sick for more than 3 days at a time. This attitude needs to change before any real progress can be made on this issue. So how do we change this? Well, the sad truth is that chronic illnesses may be invisible, but the chronically ill can no longer afford to be. Anytime that you are blogging about your experiences, anytime you read a story on a site like the Wall Street Journal or Forbes or Time Magazine or WebMD or wherever, if you're commenting on a story about chronic illness or painkillers, I want you to do two things. I want you to use two particular hashtags: don't punish pain and give pain a voice. Eventually, the media will have to take notice, and when the media starts to take notice, we might actually be able to get these stories in front of mainstream publications and news magazine shows like the Today Show and Good Morning America and Ellen DeGeneres and Dr. Phil and all of them. And people might start to ask the right questions and might start to actually learn something about the plight of the chronically ill. I'll close with a quote from Hubert Humphrey, who was the 38th Vice President of the United States. He once said, "The moral test of a government is how that government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the elderly, and those who are in the shadows of life, the sick, the needy, and the handicapped." America, we're failing that test. I believe we can do better, so prove me right. As always, thank you so much for joining me. And if you have any questions, send them to ken@don'tpunishpain.com. You can follow me at Twitter @don'tpunishpain. And until next time, I'm Ken McKim. You take care.